Live. We lost Matt. He's struggling with some med issues. So.
All right, let's start with, if you don't mind, medical premiums.
Mhm.
So Don will hand it out and walk you through real quick what that looks like. We do have the word draft on it because we generally don't finalize our premiums until we issue them for open enrollment, which is the first 2 weeks in November.
Yeah.
1 through November 1 through 14. So that's something you guys want to remember too. Try to help us with your membership, make sure they do their open enrollment.
Extra ghost over here.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head what the percentage change is, or?
Yep, it's a little bit less than 5%.
Okay.
Do you happen to have the old numbers by chance?
They're in your contract. I don't have them just in my contract,
Okay,
but you'll see it's
in our current.
yeah, if you do 5% and then we round it down, so you'll see there's no change on any of these for medical.
And it's Gina, is it the same with Plan 1 and Plan 2? They're both
Yes.
like equally.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yep,
Gotcha.
across the board.
Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Are you looking at what article it is?
Yeah, it's 21. I was just looking at that too. 21, okay. Do you want me to read them off or not?
Sure.
Okay. So Plan 1, the current 27.71 plus 1, 206.85. Family, 247.95. And then the high deductible, Plan 2, single is 0, plus 1 is 101.50. Family is 185.
So some of them actually went down.
What article was that, Stacy?
21.
21.
Oh, just kidding. Never disregard my statement.
I was like, I don't think so, but I need to look at that.
Disregard.
There we go. There's current.
It's been a long day.
And then you said dental no change, correct?
Dental's no change.
Oh, that's what you're doing.
Once in a while, I can figure stuff out.
And this, you guys probably know this, but the rate change doesn't happen until January 1. It's on a calendar year. So after open enrollment, those rates don't apply until January 1.
Gotcha.
Okay, our counter, you're gonna find it's the same as our last proposal. So we're at 3.5 for general wage increase and 3 between the steps. The spreadsheet I sent you is based on that information. So this is where we're at. So it's not any different than what we've already presented. I think the only slight difference, as we talked about in your proposal, is on the sergeant schedule, Appendix D2, I just crossed through shall move on their anniversary, so there's no confusion. And then on the criminal list, I think I just added ratification by both parties, just the work by both parties. One thing we did want to talk a little bit about, I think the sergeants and probably the CSIs are important to talk about this. So throughout this contract year, so we're bargaining for 1 fiscal year with these wages. If there was a promotion of a sergeant, the intent of our language is they don't get promoted on a step and then get another step. So I just want to talk that through. So if there's an incident where anyone would get promoted to a sergeant in this fiscal year, it's not guaranteed a double step. We are only talking about people in place, and the officers and sergeants get that step at the beginning of the October, beginning of fiscal year. So then I was thinking, if we hired a CSI by chance, if something happens, they don't get hired on the step and not immediately get another step. But if they're hired on, that is their step for that fiscal year.
There is a language elsewhere in the contract, correct me if I'm wrong, a sergeant that would get hired or promoted would get a minimum of the percentage that's in that article, correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
that's still at the bottom of the schedule,
Okay,
Appendix D. They
gotcha.
get 10%, and if it's less than that, they get the next highest step.
Okay,
But I just wanted to talk that through. That was kind of our intent, but I just wanted to verbalize that, so there's no misunderstanding, there's not a double bump in the middle of any fiscal year if people are moved around.
So to clarify that, like you're saying, if somebody was to be hired the month of September prior to October 1, they were hired at a step 1 in September, they're not gonna go to a step 2 as of October.
No, they could. If they were hired in December, they're not gonna be hired as a step 1 and then get a 2.
and
They
in
only
theory,
get that if they're in place as of October 1, if that makes sense. So if they're hired throughout the fiscal year, it doesn't apply. They would, for CSIs, they'd just be hired on whatever step they're hired at. They don't get a double bump.
but in regards to the promotion list that's in place, like you spoke of, that officer in theory would have gotten a bump October 1st in the officer pay. So the 10% corresponding promotion to the sergeant would be, it's gonna wash out.
Yeah. You
Gotcha.
got it when you were an
Okay.
officer.
I appreciate the explanation though.
That's all we have.
Are you proposing this step in October the 1st just for this year 2 of the contract?
Yes, that's all we're talking about is the second year. Yep.
And then so for coming back here next year in year 3, we or not have to, we just automatically October the 1st going to be back to the old system or the existing system where you have a step on your anniversary date
We would negotiate that. You would negotiate that again for the third year.
to get that back to us?
Yes. Whether it's at the beginning or anniversary, you can negotiate that back.
I don't understand why we would have to try to negotiate it back if this proposal is only effective and applies to year 2.
What would you apply to year 3 if it only affects this year?
I thought we go back to the original.
You would negotiate wages for 3, whether you want your steps on the anniversary or the beginning of October.
We'd have to negotiate that.
Yeah, just like we're doing for year 2 right now. Yeah.
So there's nothing in an MOU that would say this proposal for jumping everybody a step in October only applies to year 2 of the contract.
Actually, the language of, I think both of our proposals states that it's just for this fiscal year.
It just says of the fiscal year.
Yes.
So the opportunity exists in year 3 to structure, or even structure. Or not at all.
So we were discussing during the break and looking at the spread of the raises. We were holding pretty firm at 4. You guys are pretty firm at 3.5. When you're looking at the dollar amounts between these like 0.5 or 1/4%, they're fairly minimal from our perspective. I'm sure initiating over the course of an entire membership's a little bit more expensive or considering on the city. We've both said several times that we're fairly close. What we would like for you to consider, and we made the changes on and have it in writing for you, is to just sort of move forward, get this agreed on at 3.75 and split the difference of the sticking point for the union and the city without the wage ties to the SO. We'll do the full thing of like it's in the contract. So no reopen or anything built in if the SO gets a certain percentage more. Just the same exact language that we've just given you that you've given us, but splitting the difference of 3.5 and 4 at 3.75, which if you look at the numbers is fairly minimal. I can tell you from our perspective, when we are taking in the consideration of the 3% between each step, the average was 2.69. So when we're calculating in those numbers, I get what you're saying, and probably just for the most part, I have to agree to disagree that the steps aren't necessarily a guarantee, but in our minds, we're always in the memberships generally expecting those steps. So when we're looking
That's
at,
two wage increases a year, I just want you to know
I
that.
understand that's
So
been
expectation
the
of two
tradition.
increases a year.
It's what we've had for as long as anybody's been here.
I know,
Right.
which has been incredible, that the
So-
city has granted that, but it should
It's just
not
gonna be very
taken
difficult for us to
granted.
go back to the membership and convince them.
What I'm
And I'm not taking them away.
okay,
but they
I'm
can't
gonna
just
pull
be
this back in
accepted
for a
as
second.
Guaranteed.
What I'm trying to do is to just, I mean, we initially set on this 6.5%, and you said we can get you there. It's just going to be in a different way or a different perspective.
Right.
So what I'm looking at, and I do see, and I'm actually am very thankful for you sharing that with us because it allows us to put eyes on each individual member so that
Right.
we can go back and say, listen, everyone's getting a minimum of this, regardless of what you think or you want to say or your lack of knowledge on things. We've put eyes on every single member to ensure that they are getting a minimum of what we agreed upon.
Sure.
The 3.75 for us, I think is a good mediation between both sides. I think it's in pretty good faith of both sides. If our sticking point's 4 and 3.5, and we're looking at the difference of a couple dollars, but for us,
You already gave me 3.8.
when we're
You can't go back up to 4.
no. Well, I will tell you our goal coming in here has always been 4. You've
I
been
gave you
pretty
6.5.
consistent on. You didn't.
Yes.
Hey,
I moved
but-
the steps.
But that's where I'm coming from,
Right.
Stacy. So the average of 2.69, you're looking at 0.31%. So 0.3, 2.7, or I'm sorry, 3.75, we're coming in around that 4 in our mind. We're not feeling like we've sacrificed and we're giving up a lot. It's not really costing the city a lot, but again, I think it's really splitting the sticking point for both sides, resolving this in a good step moving forward. And we would really, really ask you to consider that. And I have it in writing if you would take it and consider it in a caucus, but that's pretty important to us. And that's why.
Well, we'll always accept it. So if you want
Yeah.
to change it in writing, we will.
But this is without the change that just came to us as far as striking that word on the sergeants, which we're
Okay.
happy to do. Yes, ma'am.
I hate to do it, but we're gonna reject. Just counter with what we gave you. We gave you the steps the entire year. So we've already built in the extra money in terms of moving the steps at the beginning of the year. So we're close, but we're maintaining where we're at. And you were able to look at the total percentage people get through the year,
I was.
realizing some people get 9%, which is beyond what you're trying to accomplish.
So what you're saying is the last 3 proposals, the city is not negotiating any change. So you've basically submitted your final offer.
I don't believe it was the last 3. I would have to go back and look at ours, but we have submitted our final offer.
We're gonna caucus on that for a little bit.
Okay.